Good evening and welcome. In the meeting, thank you to everyone for attending tonight's meeting at the San Bruno Community Foundation's Board of Directors. We're in person at the San Bruno Senior Center, and we welcome members of the public who are attending via Zoom. We appreciate your patience if we have any technical hiccups. We ask speakers to speak loudly and clearly so that the microphones can pick you up, and that our online guests, as well as everyone in the room, can hear you well. A couple of technical items before we get to the content of tonight's meeting. Please know that we want to hear from you, members of the public who are here at the Senior Center in person. If you would like to speak during public comment for items within the jurisdiction of the board that are not on this agenda or on any of our agendized items, please fill out one of the speaker cards that is on the table near you. If you are attending on Zoom and would like to address the board during public comment for items not on this agenda or on any of our agendized items, please use the raise your hand button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Once you raise your hand, the executive director will see that someone wants to talk, and she will let me know that you are waiting. When it is your turn to speak, the executive director will call your name and unmute you. If you are joining us by telephone, you may also address the board during public comment by pressing *9, and the executive director will address you and unmute you. Speakers will be given 3 minutes to address the board. Please note that individuals may only speak once per agenda item. Let's see. Did we receive anything prior to the meeting, Leslie?
No, we did not.
All right, thank you. First item is call to order and welcome. I now call the regular meeting of the San Bruno Community Foundation's Board of Directors, November 6, 2025 to order. President Melissa Natani Jones is not able to attend tonight's meeting in person. Melissa is under doctor's orders to remain at home for the time being. She has notified us that she will be attending remotely for just cause, and legal counsel Heather Minner has confirmed that President Natani Jones may do so under the Brown Act meeting provisions, provided a quorum of the board attends in person. Given that I see 4 board members are here tonight, President Natani Jones may attend remotely. President Natani Jones, as required by the Brown Act, could you please let us know if there is anyone 18 years of age or older in the room with you, and if so, your relationship with them?
There is not.
Thank you. As President Natani Jones is participating on Zoom, I will be chairing the meeting in person here at the Senior Center. So let's begin the meeting. Also, let us know if an adult happens to join you in the room later. Melissa, thank you.
Will do, thank you.
Okay. Our second item is roll call. Raul, will you please call the roll?
Thank you. Here we go. Board member Belinda Wong.
Present.
Board member Supriya Perry is excused with notice. Treasurer Pac Lin.
Here.
Secretary Raul Gomez is here. Vice President Jim Roy.
Here.
And President Melissa Natani Jones.
Here.
Thank you. Item number 3, public comment. Would any members of the public like to address the board on a topic that is within the jurisdiction of the board but is not on tonight's agenda? For those on Zoom, please indicate so by using the raise hand button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Any hands, Leslie?
I do not see any hands online.
Okay. No one in person? Okay, approval of the minutes. Item number 4, September 4th, 2024, regular special board meeting. Secretary Gomez. Can you present the minutes?
Absolutely. So in your meeting packet tonight are the minutes from our September 4th, 2024 regular special board meeting. Jim?
Any questions from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? They have a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion and second. Raul, would you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Board member Belinda Wong.
Aye.
Supriya Perry is excused with notice. Treasurer Pac Lin.
Aye.
Secretary Raul Gomez is an aye. Vice President Jim Roy.
Aye.
And President Melissa Natani Jones.
Thank
Aye.
you.
All ayes.
Item number 5, executive director's report. Leslie?
Good evening. It's good to see everyone here tonight. The meeting packet contains my written executive director's report. So in the interest of time, because we have some big items coming up, I just want to emphasize a couple of highlights. First, our annual report went out to the San Bruno community. It was mailed to all San Bruno addresses in late October. And not surprisingly, the report this year features the opening of the rack. and it's prominently highlighted there. I also want to call attention to the page highlighting our Crestmore Scholar alum. We actually had a numbered feature this year, and I think you'll be really impressed with all that they've already accomplished in college and beyond. PDF of the report is posted on the website. There are also some copies on the back table, and I can get you more if you would like others to distribute to the public. The board meeting calendar for 2025, as you know, our regular meeting schedule is for the first Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. Here in the senior center. The first meeting in January is actually January 1st. We will cancel that meeting due to the holiday. If we need to have another meeting in January, we will schedule a special meeting because we don't think you want to spend that night with us here. And meetings in the first half of the year we likely will have most of them because we do want to use them for a lot of our strategic planning. So even if we don't have a ton of timely business, we will use them. We're looking into the possibility of moving our meetings to the RAF. The city council has moved meetings there. They're still working out some of the logistics of that. And there are expenses that are higher than what we are currently paying to have meetings here. So when we sort of sort through what that total will be, and let the city sort of work out the technical logistics, I think we stay here a few more months and then revisit the question once we have a good handle on the costs and whether it makes sense for us to move all or some of our meetings there. That is my executive director's report tonight.
Good. Any questions for Leslie from the board?
Yeah.
Any questions or comments from the public?
I do have a hand raised online, Amanda and Dominic. I'm allowing you to talk. Did you want to speak on this topic or are you looking to speak on a different?
I apologize. It's on the topic for the Crestmore Fields.
Okay, great. We'll get back to you when we get to that item.
Okay. That concludes the executive director's report. Thank you, Leslie. Item number 6, our consent calendar. We're going to receive and approve the treasurer's report for August and September 2024 financial statements. We have one item of consent today as listed in the agenda. Would any members of the public like to comment on a consent item?
No, online.
Okay. Unless there are questions or comments from the board, I call for a motion to adopt the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call for the vote, please.
Thank you, Jim. Board member Belinda Wong.
Aye.
Board member Supriya Perry is excused with notice. Treasurer Pac Lin.
Aye.
Secretary Raul Gomez is an aye. Vice President Jim Ruane.
Aye.
President Melissa Natani Jones.
Aye.
All ayes.
All right, thank you. Item number 7, conduct of business. Received a report from the audit committee and presentation from Novogradek and Company LLP regarding the San Bruno Community Foundation's audited financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2024. Adopt a resolution approving the foundation's audited financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2024. Discuss the foundation's annual federal and state tax returns and discuss requests for proposals for audit and tax preparation services. Secretary Gomez is the chair of the audit committee and will introduce the report. Raul.
Thank you, Jim. Early this year, the board approved engagement with Novogradek and Company to conduct the annual audit of Foundation's financial statements and prepare the Foundation's federal and state tax returns for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024. In July, accounting consultants Frank Bittner, executive director Leslie Hadamia began preparing the financial reports and documentation for the audit, submitting all of the requested materials by August 18th. The Novogradek team, which was again headed by partner Lance Smith, examined the foundation's financial records, accounts, business transactions, accounting practices, and internal controls. Leslie and Frank responded to several follow-up requests for additional information from the Novogradek team. On October 21st, the audit committee, consisting of myself and Vice President Jim Ryan, met to discuss the audited financials with the Novogradek team. By resolution, the committee accepted the audited financial statements. Following the meeting, the Novogradek team produced the final audit reports and the AUC 260 letter, which were in your meeting packet tonight. The Novogradac team also prepared the foundation's federal and state returns and the current draft, which Leslie and Frank have reviewed and was distributed to the board last week. The plan is to finalize and submit them by the November 15th deadline. You will have the opportunity to ask any questions about the tax returns after our auditor's presentation. But it is now my pleasure to introduce Lance Smith, who will walk the board through their audited financial statements. Lance?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to meet with you and present financials for you. I will first want to thank Leslie Amaya and Frank Bidner for their work in helping me to get the information I needed to be able to reach the opinion I have, and that it's to be able to provide a clean opinion on your financial statements. And layman terms, they look good. In reaching the opinion of our audit, we use professional judgment and skepticism in the process of identifying and assessing risks, material misstatements, obtaining understanding of the relevant internal controls, evaluating the appropriateness of the accounting policies, and the reasonableness of significant accounting estimates, as well as the overall presentation of the financial statements. And in doing so, I'm first pleased to see the completion of the rec and aquatic center that you've been so diligently working on. Beautiful. Noting that major funding did come from this organization being able to make that happen. Well, you'll see that the last vestiges of that, I think, in the financial statements. So Leslie has the financial statements presented above us here, but if we go to the statement of financial position, you'll see our report right there is a clean opinion. It's a pretty standard routine there. But the statement of financial positions, you'll see that the major change on here is that the investments decreased by about $6 million, and sort of the accrued grants decrease of about $7 million, which is the residual payment of the funding that you made for that aquatic center. So with that, most of the activity, rest of the activity is pretty routine annual ongoing activity that you have on the statement of activities. This shows the activity that your most volatile item is probably those investment returns, but they were pretty consistent with the prior year. The main change on here, you see on the statement of functional expense, gives the detail of the expenses that were on the statement of activities. You'll see the main change here is the decrease in grant expenditures as the rest of those funding has gone through. So the final item that I note on here is note 3 on towards the end of the financial statements. I would like to make sure that you're clear on how liquid you are and be able to have funding to be able to pay your normal bills. A lot of nonprofits will get all of their funds tied up. They think they've got a lot of funds, but they're not available because they're all committed. In this case, you have about $5.6 million, which is fairly consistent with where you were last year as well. With that, that's the presentation of the financial statements. I also issued what we call the 260 letter. It's the management letter, and it's pretty standard routine language there. It highlights if there were any major issues, we're able to bring that up in that letter. We had nothing significant to note. So, again, pleasure to be able to work with Leslie and her and Frank to be able to put this together. So I was noted that you might have some questions as well about the 990. So happy to talk about either the financial statements or the 990. If you have any questions.
Any questions for Lance from the board? Any questions from the public? Are there any hands raised, Leslie?
No, they're not.
Okay. Okay, call for motion to adopt the resolution approving foundation's audited financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2024.
I'll make the motion. Second.
There's a motion and a second. Roll, would you call the roll, please?
Board member Belinda Wong.
Aye.
Board member Supriya Perry is excused with notice. Treasurer Pac Lynn.
Aye.
Secretary Raul Gomez is an aye. Vice President Jim Rowing.
Aye.
President Melissa Natani Jones.
Aye.
All ayes.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Lance. We appreciate your firm's work on our audit. Secretary Gomez, I turn the floor back to you to complete the second half of the audit committee's report.
Thank you, Jim. The foundation's fiscal policies and procedures require that the foundation to issue a request for proposal for audit and tax preparation services at least every 5 years and changes and charges the audit committee support by the executive director with grading the RFP, reviewing audit proposals, and recommending a certified public accounting firm to the full audit for approval. The foundation issued the first RFP for audit and tax preparation services in 2015 when the board selected Novogradac & Company as its auditor. The foundation issued another RFP in late 2019 as Novogradac had prepared the foundation audit financial statements and tax returns for 5 consecutive years. While fiscal policies and procedures require issuing a RFP at least every 5 years, they do not require that the board make a change in CPA firms. The board ultimately approved continuing with Novogradac with Bland Smith heading the engagement, but were required that Novogradac rotate the staff accountants working on the foundation's account to bring fresh eyes to the audit, but still enable the firm to leverage its 5 years of experience with the foundation. As Novogradac has now prepared the foundation audit financial statements and tax returns for 5 consecutive years since the last RFP, the foundation must issue a new RFP for the fiscal year 2024 and 25 audit and tax preparation. Our executive director has prepared a draft RFP, which the audit committee reviewed on October 21st. The plan is to issue the RFP for the CPA firms with nonprofit practices in mid-November, set a January 10 deadline, and the committee will then receive or review submitted proposals, select finalists to interview, and check references in January and February, and then bring a recommendation to the board in March board meeting. The draft RFP was in the board meeting packet. Do any members have any questions about the process or want to provide any feedback on the RFP?
No questions from the board. Any questions from the public? The hands raised, Leslie.
No, they're not.
Thank you. Well, is there any further comments from the board that concludes this item? Thank you, Secretary Gomez. We're right on to number B, receive report on the Crestmore Fields project from the city of San Bruno, discuss potential grant effects of on the foundation's net assets and strategic planning, and adopt a resolution creating and appointing members to an ad hoc committee on Crestmore Fields project. As most of us know, the former site of the Crestmore High School has been the home to youth soccer in San Bruno for decades. The San Mateo Union High School District is about to finalize the sale of the site to a developer that has received the necessary city entitlement approvals to develop a new subdivision consisting of 155 single-family homes. As part of the deal, 6.9 acres are being dedicated to the city, including 5.3 acres for recreational athletic fields. The city has approached the foundation about providing roughly half the funding needed to have the developer construct the athletic field complex, which would provide a new home for youth soccer, potentially other youth sports in San Bruno. Here tonight is San Bruno Assistant City Manager Darcy Smith, who will tell us about the Crestmore Fields project and the city's $3.4 million request for strategic grant funding. After their presentation, Executive Director Hanamiya will provide an overview of how awarding a grant of the size being requested would affect the foundation's net assets and its strategic planning deliberations, which we intend to resume in early 2025. Then the board will consider a resolution creating and appointing members to a new ad hoc committee on Crestmore Fields project to review the city's request and make a recommendation to the full board. Under the resolution, I would chair the committee, and Secretary Raul Gomez and Treasurer Packlin would serve as committee members. If the board adopts the resolution creating this committee, such action would not commit the foundation to supporting additional funding. If the committee were to eventually propose one or more strategic grants, the board would need to take separate action to consider such proposals. Darcy, you're on.
Thank you. Is the sound working? Hopefully. Does anyone else want to take a seat? We have plenty of chairs. Actually, front. I'm Darcy Smith. I'm the Assistant City Manager for the city. And full disclosure, I was at one point a YSO coach. Unfortunately, my kids didn't make it past, I think, U5, but I was a coach at one point, so I'm very familiar with soccer. Good evening, President Natanya Jones and Vice President Ryan. Thank you for having me here tonight to present on this item. Next slide. So I'm here to present as Vice President Rain said about the Crestmore Fields project. Many of you have heard a lot about it, but this is yet another chapter in the book. And it's just important to note we're at a really pivotal time here. So we're coming here tonight to give you a full update of where we stand right now. Again, lots happened since we updated you last and updated the City Council in August. And we're also here to contemplate the strategic grant request. And I'll really try to tell the story of why we're here tonight, what that grant would mean, so that if you choose to form the ad hoc committee, you're informed. And then, of course, we will be a resource to you through the next month as you look at that grant request. So next slide. Just a quick background. I think many of you know where the site is. You play there now, so I don't need to educate you too much. But just a note is that it's still owned by the high school district. Yes, they've been wanting to sell this land for many, many years. It's a very long process to sell school land, and it's a very long process to get the land approved by the city. But I'm really happy to say that as of right now, it looks like the land sale is going to close in early February. And I went to the district board last month, extending it, I think, for the 6th time, but it's set from what I've heard to close in early February. Next slide. So yes, you all know it was a high school at one point. We know people who went to high school there, and I met someone today who said, well, I played on those fields in the 80s and I'm old. And now we have these kids playing on those fields. And important to note, the city traditionally maintained those fields and managed them, and we ran the programs that supported the youth soccer fields. After COVID, the district shifted responsibility to managing and maintaining the fields on a short-term basis to AYSA and low-end soccer clubs. And the information I have is that the time is really winding down. They will be leaving the site in the next few weeks, and by December, have their leases terminated. So now is again, like, the pressure is on to figure out a solution. And we've been working on other solutions, but the reality is there's not space like you see here, lots of space to have the practice and the games. Next slide. So just a snapshot of what's happening on the site. The city approved 155 new units that you see here, detached units, and that will be the bulk of the site. But the city was successful through, a very strategically negotiated agreement to obtain almost 7 acres of land, and I'll show you where that land is and what our plans are for that. And it's just important to note, pinpoint that is given to the city free of charge. It is certainly worth tens of millions of dollars, and so the city has an investment in that land. But as you'll see, the fields also cost over, full build out over $10 million. So, but it's like we're land rich, but cash poor. But we're very blessed, and we very much appreciate the district's cooperation and the support from the community to get this far, because 7 acres of land on the peninsula is very, very rare. So we're really excited about that. And then the construction. So from what I understand from the developer, I met with them last week, they have submitted grading permits for kids. That means they just move a bunch of dirt around. It's called grading. Not very glamorous. And then the improvement plans to build roads, which would be a little more exciting with tractors and diggers out there. Those are in for the city. So this means it's really happening. And the permit plans for the houses would come in next year. So they're hoping to start construction in February or March. Now you might ask, okay, well, they're going to close on it. They already have approval from the district to do remediation and potentially start tearing down the buildings. There's a lot of buildings there, so it's going to take time. But construction looks like it's going to start in early 2025, which is right around the corner. 4 years of construction, though, that's a long time. Finished in 2029. So I'll detail the timeline for building it out soon. And the city hopes to build fields early on. That's our goal. So don't think it's going to go till 2029. Just important to note that while Summerhill was the initial developer, there was a meeting on the site last week with Toll Brothers, and they have a separate agreement, separate from the school district, to purchase the land from Summerhill, and they intend to follow the plan, which you'll see on the next slide, and build the residential homes. So the city went through the process to do a master plan. Many of you participated in that process, which we really appreciate. It was independent of the home process. The city in 2023 knew with certainty that we would be getting this land for field use. So we went through a master plan process with the community engagement, It was presented to the Parks and Rec Commission in April, and alternatives presented to the City Council in May of 2023, and then in October of 2023, the City Council reviewed and provided direction on the final master plan, which you'll see. I call that, the Platinum Deluxe version. So I'll talk through how we are breaking that into 2 phases to be more feasible in terms of the construction costs. But really important to note for this group, that we also in California are subject to a very long name called the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. I think you know from the Recreation and Aquatic Center, that can be a quite laborious, time-consuming process. And again, we were very grateful that the developer in their big, robust environmental impact report included the fields and included lighting. That is actually a big environmental impact because of the light spill. I just want to note this project is shovel ready. That's just important from a funding perspective. When the city or other organizations apply for grants, the question is always, well, okay, that sounds like a great project, but are you shovel ready? And you go out and build it. Again, as you know, from the Recreation Aquatic Center, you have an idea and then it can take 10 years to get through that process. So it's just really important to note that the environmental impact report was certified by the City Council in May of this year. So we really are shovel ready. We have our environmental clearances in place. We are ready to go. So next slide. So that master plan, what is that? It basically allows for the continued soccer fields, and I apologize, it's cut off. But for the kids in the room, I think you'll be happy to know there's 8 soccer fields. They overlap a little bit. I think many of you know that when you're U6, you have a little field. And what's the biggest field? Yes, perfect. Okay, so this is sized, of course, to have a U11 by 11. It would take up the full area, which I'll show you in a second. But that is the biggest field, so we sized it for that. And we also had some extra land left over. We know you need a restroom. That's really important. Ideally, storage areas. Nice to have a picnic table. And we also heard from your parents that they need a lot of parking. Yeah. So we have a drop-off zone and a lot of parking because we know that people watch you play. So next. So this was the original master plan. Again, the Cadillac or Platinum version, which it's good to start with that through the planning process. A long-range master plan is never meant to be the final design. We could then go through, an engineering process and a cost process. But this is the plan that went through the City Council and the community engagement process. And what we approach it from a budget perspective is just breaking it into 2 parts. I want to emphasize that this is still the city's vision for build out. And we would love to build this, and it has lots of amenities like what we're building at Florida Park, right? A little fitness court and a lot of extra amenities. But what I and the team worked on most recently was sort of what do we need to make sure kids can play soccer? And again, there are certain things they need, like a restaurant and lots of parking, but there are other things that maybe are a little more luxurious, and that include things like fitness courts and a lot of picnic tables. So next, the funding feasibility analysis. So again, the city looked at the funding feasibility through when the master plan was done. And, it may shock some people in the room to know that this is $10 to $12 million. I think your team knows from the Recreation and Aquatic Center just how costs skyrocket, right? When we first started back in the Recreation and Aquatic Center, 40, 50 million, and now it's like 64 and counting. Fields are like that, parks are like that, construction is just like that. Then we have inflation for our construction where we use union labor, prevailing wage labor, and we have to pay, we have to procure goods in certain public ways. We are often faced with inflation of 10% per year. So it just costs more money over time, but those are current dollars. Many of you voted yesterday, Measure Q at this point looks like it's passing, and we appreciate all the community support for that. But the general election polling that we did for that measure, these fields didn't poll successfully, so it wasn't included. That Measure Q includes 3 things: roads, pavings, and stormwater facilities, but no parks. When we build parks, we're usually using park fees, which I'll talk about in a little bit, or grants. So as of right now, the city doesn't have funding to fund that project. I just want to note, we do have other projects in town, residential projects that pay these things called park impact fees, which is what this project will pay. But it's just important to note, a lot of our growth right now is around the El Camino Real transit corridor. And we really want to spend that money in that neighborhood. And actually our recently adopted housing element requires us to invest those park funds around those neighborhoods. They're called lower resource neighborhoods, but they're lower socioeconomic neighborhoods based on data parameters. And so we're just focusing investments in that neighborhood. We have been able to do that, as you know, with Florida Park and Centennial Park. But this neighborhood, man, you know, is a little more isolated. So we don't qualify for a lot of state grants where, again, they want to invest in the lower resource neighborhoods. And we are also not easily able to use city park funds because, again, our investment under our housing element is focused on those neighborhoods. But I'll talk you through how much this project is paying in impact fees. And again, the goal is to use the city funds and keep them in this neighborhood. So next slide. So this initial funding concept, which I'll walk through, phase one, would be a private public partnership. Well, what does that mean? Essentially means that the city pays the developer, gives them a park fee credit to build the parks. What that really means is that they can do it faster and quicker and more efficiently than we can because they're already mobilized on the site, building roads, building other parks. Actually, I have some private parks in the project. And that construction, just, you know, like the roads in their parks takes about a year. So they're on the site. That's the first year. So we would have an improvement agreement, and developers and cities often enter into these. Sometimes it's done for more of the public infrastructure, like the roads and the sewer system and the water system, which I know are not very glamorous at all. But there is, in bigger cities, you know, if you go out to the valley, this is done. They're called turnkey parks. So if you're really curious about this, you can search it up. But it's very common for cities, especially in big residential subdivisions, to allow the developer to build the park and then essentially turn the keys over to the city. And we own the land, we own the park, we are responsible for the maintenance longer term. But the developers are really good at building. Guess what? Cities are more good, I'll be honest, at building like utility infrastructure, and parks can be a little bit more challenging. But developers build parks all the time. So this project would include what these kids need to play soccer at $7 million. And so again, I'll walk through what I kind of teased off. That doesn't mean, again, that there could be more phases with more construction, with, I'll call amenities. But so what we would have is those 8 smaller overlapping soccer fields, the big U11 by 11, a single stall prefab restroom. We're looking at having like mobile concession vendors so they can plug into utility connections and a concrete pad. And that would also allow like fundraisers. Sometimes they have, you know, barbecues and they want to put up a tent and sell and vend. So they can do that for bigger events. Lots of parking. We did not mince the parking. We know we need parking. We know we need parking lot lighting so it's safe. We have priced out the cost of electrical conduit for the future installation of permanent lighting. That could also include wiring to plug in temporary lights. But I want to emphasize, and I know folks will talk about the lights tonight, it's another $2 million. If $2 million just fell from the sky and landed, it would be great to have them. But permanent lights are very, very expensive. That said, temporary lights that come in have become more cost feasible, especially with the LED lights. They can literally just plug into a wall plug. So we're costing that out and think that would be feasible to allow the clubs and AYSO to bring in their own lights and store them. We'll have storage for them. But the permanent lights are really expensive. And then this price is all in for the permitting costs, for the inspections, for everything, the cost of preparing all the documents. What isn't included, again, is the lights, a fitness exercise station, a bunch of bleachers, a perimeter walking track, a backstop for baseball and softball use. At this point, we think soccer kids are the main usage group there. We don't need baseball fields. Travis Carlin, our community services director, can attest to that. So we didn't want to waste money on a backstop that we wouldn't need. This is, again, looking at what we don't think we need right now. If we get more money or we have a lot of contingency, we would include these things. Next slide. So this graphic here shows that phase one. And again, you see, what do you see, guys? Soccer fields. Okay, so you get the fields, and then we worked hard, Mr. Carlin and I in the city, and we want to build artificial fields. We just think they will provide more playing time. So that would be really nice. So, you know, when it rains, they are easy, you can play on them faster. And so this would be artificial turf, which we're really excited about. And then the second phase that you'll see here, I think this really shows the view of like what's not included. It's trees, it's picnic tables, it's the fitness equipment, and, you know, a few other things that in our assessment was just nice to have. But again, that could come if we have extra funding. A lot of times with these projects, we don't know how they're gonna bid. So we'll do what we call add alternates. That's a fancy name for just things that would be nice to have. With Centennial Plaza, we got things, like the water bottle filling station and the lights that you saw, the really pretty lights, that were strung up. So we'll be optimistic, but it's really hard for us to predict the construction market. But I will tell you that developer often gets, I don't say better prices than us, but they have connections in the construction world that we just don't have. And important to note, this would all be prevailing wage labor because the city funds are involved. Okay, next. So let's talk about money a little bit because, money is still important. So really important to note this, the developers paying impact fees, those are assessed on new development to pay their fair share of capital facilities and improvements that are needed to serve the development. And again, you heard me say, well, we have a lot of other projects paying these fees and El Camino, the transit corridor plan. But this neighborhood itself will pay about 3.6 million. And my goal is to keep it in this neighborhood, which is tiny, and use that money to build these fields, but it's not enough, right? Again, they're paying about 3.6 million that can be used for what you saw in phase one. So there's a gap of 3.4 million. I want to emphasize this budget, which you'll see in the grant proposal, has a very healthy contingency. We've learned that from the RAC. We don't want to keep coming back to you and begging for more. But as I said, I don't have a crystal ball of construction costs. But the developer would try to start construction on this next spring. So I'd like to think that these costs are pretty stable. And to build this, we got 3 different quotes. So essentially the city with our potential grant request is basically looking for a match. And I know you're gonna say, well, the developers paying this, but it's just important to know they are city impact fees. We would be getting them to spend on other projects if we didn't spend them here. But I'm very focused on trying to make sure that also the new residents have park space to use. I think most people would be really, really excited to have a field next to them. Even if they don't play soccer, they could go out and play catch, or some people I see doing just sprints on a field or doing push-ups or doing random stuff. If you have a field near you, you're going to use it. So it's very much an investment in the neighborhood and in that whole neighborhood, which is sort of short on recreation facilities. Okay, next. So some of you were at the August 27th City Council study session where we presented this idea to them, and the City Council was very supportive of this private-public partnership with the developer and said they were the favored route to develop the fields and pursue outside funding options. So like I said, this isn't right for other grants, state grants, because it's in a higher resource neighborhood. We don't have any other county grants. I mean, sometimes, as you know, we can get Measure K funds or other little bits of funds, but there's no grants here. Hence we're here tonight. So the next timeline. So again, I said 5 years to build this approximately, well, 4.5. So depending on the finalization of funding, which hopefully you'll consider the grant request and take action later this year or early next year, then will be presented to the city council, who then ultimately would approve the agreement with the developer. Does that make sense? So we could potentially have a grant agreement like we've done for other projects, and then the city has an agreement with the developer to build the fields for $7 million. We would finalize park construction plans in the spring, and again, if my crystal ball lines up, start construction in the summer. I'll tell you, the developer is really, really motivated. So it's like if we can just, jump on their train, we'll be moving very fast. They are very motivated. They see the residential market is very strong right now. So that's good. And like I said, they want to start in the spring. And then this would start right after that in the summer, and it would take 9 to 12 months. But the challenge is it's a 40-acre site, and they'll be closing the road down. They're gonna be doing that soon and blocking off the whole site. So we'd really align opening the park, the soccer fields, with opening the road and opening the model homes. And they've told me that's kind of late summer, fall of 26. So it takes a long time to build these, as you know. If I could build it faster, I would, but it just takes time. There's probably a small likelihood the fields are done a little bit before the model homes, but you need the roadway in, right? And again, you need all the parking. If you look at the site plans, there's a lot of parking along Portland that we kind of shoehorned in addition to the main lot. So we really need the whole road done. And it's just important. This is a 40-acre site, so there's a lot of construction going on that just takes time. But if you look at the whole timeline to 2029, you'll still say, well, so that's a good thing. Okay, next slide. So then, our grant request. So, I really wanted to spend time on why are we here? Like I said, there's no other funding sources available. The city prepares an annual budget. We prepare it. It's adopted in June. So this is early for that. But just important to note, the city's funding is limited. I know, Measure Q passes, people are gonna think, oh, you just got this big bond measure, but that's only for stormwater paving and fire station. So that's very limited. We just don't have a lot of money for parks. But I think this is a real great solution. We have this very compressed timeline, and if we want to take advantage of the developers offer, there's a compressed time frame. We really need to decide by the end of this year and get everything lined up to go to the city council in early 2025, or that opportunity is lost. I can't phone the developer next summer and say, oh, well, we finally figured this out. They'd say, well, we're done doing the grading and the roads. We need to move on to the homes. So we've been asked for the developer to confirm our willingness as soon as possible, early 2025, or it's lost. And it's important to note, this is the capital project that most urgently needs your support. So I think, we finished the RAC, which we're incredibly proud of and appreciate your support. We finished Centennial Park, groundbreaking on Florida Park next Friday, which I'm really excited about. We've hopefully got this bond measure approved, and we've got the fire station, the road paving, and the stormwater, shored up, and we have a lot of infrastructure needs. But this is an outlier that doesn't fit into any of the funding buckets that we traditionally use. And you also heard Libby say that, when we get the park fees from projects, we just try to spend them in the neighborhood. And we're seeing the development, as you know, on San Bruno Avenue, El Camino, and the quarter plan. We need to invest that money down there. But we would be investing all the money we have. Does that make sense, from the impact fees? So I just want to emphasize that. And next, so why are the benefits to the community? Well, you can see with these kids here, this has been playing on Crestmore Fields, that they've played there honestly for decades. And if not, they lose those fields. We are working again on alternative fields. We've been working with CAP, we've been working with Skyline, but it's very hard. There's a lot of competing interest for those fields. And their needs are often stacked behind the high school and the college district. And nothing is comparably available. You heard me say, we have great fields for baseball and other fields, but we don't have a soccer facility. And if we don't do this, I'm just to be candid, it will be fenced in dirt, which will make a lot of people very disappointed. These kids, as you'll hear from them, and this really benefits the whole city. Lots of cities have great field facilities. And it just takes a vision and investment, as you can see here. And it will benefit the neighborhood, like I said. I mean, lots of fields. I have a field near my house, and I go there and enjoy it. And so I think I want you to look at it more as an amenity for the community. We've built this beautiful indoor gym, indoor pool, outdoor pool. We have invested in baseball fields over the years, but we have not invested in the soccer community. So in conclusion, it was a lot, but I told you we wanted to tell a story, whole chapter. This project would ensure these fields remain usable to meet the recreation needs. And again, they're here. These are your community members who need these fields. And it would be another meaningful and lasting legacy for the use of the restitution funds, and a differentiated project, if you will, from some of your other funds. So that's my presentation. Happy to answer any questions you have. And again, Mr. Carlin's here, Community Services Director.
Thank you, Darcy. Any questions at this time from the board for Darcy Smith or Travis?
I do have a question. I didn't see it, and it could be because I didn't look carefully enough. In terms of the timing of the funding requirement, because you're working with the developer, is it kind of like a pass-through throughout the process, or is it, you need the lump sum right away?
Yes, so it's essentially like how the Recreation Aquatic Center grant was, but so the developer will give us invoices and say like, hey, we've done this much work, we need to get reimbursed on a quarterly basis. Yeah, so the money would be paid out again over about a 1-year period, starting next summer, and then being paid out finally in mid-26.
I do want to say your presentation is great because they answered a lot of my questions.
Great.
Good. Anything else from the board? No?
Darcy, great presentation. I want to echo on what you just mentioned, but I have a question with respect to the lights. So you had mentioned temporary versus permanent. What are the advantages of the permanent lighting in your opinion?
Well, obviously they're permanent. It's less mechanical I've seen the temporary lights. You have to kind of wheel them up, and the ones they have now, they expand up, and so there's more moving parts that could break over time. It's cheaper, right? So like anything, it's less of an investment. Also, I was told in what I saw recently was you should plug it into an outlet, and so things can go wrong with that, right? Especially with weather. But the permanent lights also have issues in the sense that they can go out, right? We have lots of street lights, as folks know, in town that go out. They're older ones, but even the new ones, I think we were over at the Racket Council meeting. We had a gentleman say, your lights are out. Went and investigated. But I think for us, the big issue right now with the permanent lights is just the cost. It's $2 million up front. And we just don't have that money. Yeah.
But this project has the
Conduit. Yes.
for temporary lighting.
Yes, for temporary lighting and for permanent lighting, if they could be built in a quick timeline. The conduit and if we put in the wiring, it will degrade over time. Yeah, but we did want to price that out. And I want to emphasize, we have always had in the scope lighting. It's just, as you see, when we get down to the nitty gritty, it's, well, how are you going to pay for this? But we have CEQA clearance for lighting. That's really important. There have been a lot of environmental challenges over lighting. We have the buy-in from the neighborhood because, neighborhood, the lights. So that is a trade-off sometimes with temporary lights, the older ones, because I used to work at Sarah High School and have to deal with their lights on that field. And we would get a lot of complaints from the neighborhood. So the newer lighting is very much focused and down. It doesn't spill as much. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Anything else from the board? Okay, before we allow questions or comments from the public, we'll have our executive director give the overview. Sorry.
Melissa.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Darcy. So, just based on the presentation and other conversations that we've had, I just want to be clear that if the foundation does not fund the soccer fields, that the city of San Bruno would likely not have financial support to have fields in the future.
That's correct. Yeah. And in the short term, it would be, and I'm really embarrassed to say this, but like a fenced in dirt lawn, because we can't keep, some people might ask, well, why can't you just keep what's there? The site is changing enough to where the fields as they exist now have to be bulldozed. And yeah, that makes me really sad. But lots of land has to move around, it's a hilly site and everything's coming down. That's just the nature of development. And then we will be given the land, right? So we'll get title to the land. We don't have it yet, which is why I've always said, we've got to go through a sequence. We'll own the land, and for security reasons, we can't have, land open. People might sprain their ankles or drive around or get hurt. So for our insurance requirements, we would have to fence it in and not allow access. And then, as I said, we have a budget cycle every year, but we don't have a dedicated source of funding for parks. We just don't. We get development that pays these fees, and then we use it for parks, or we get grants. But we would be, I know a lot about the city's budget. I was the interim CFO for a period, and I'm definitely very knowledgeable about how we can, utilize 20 different sources to try to fund something. And there's just not funding for fields like this or parks. And there's not grants. I would love have lots of money coming from the state or the local sources for fields. I think it's really important to the community to be healthy and have recreation facilities. But as you know, for example, from funding so many of our parks and recreation facilities, that's very hard to come up with this much money. Yeah. But yeah, every budget cycle is different, and we have lots of projects that come into the hopper. But at the end of the day, we're very limited in what we can fund.
Thanks. Great presentation, Darcy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on the board? Okay, before we allow questions or comments from the public, we'll have our executive director give the overview of how awarding this grant would affect the foundation's net assets and its strategic planning deliberations. Leslie.
Let me get the slides up. Okay, so what we wanted to do before we take the vote on the resolution to create the committee is just make sure you're aware of what this means financially for the foundation, both in terms of our current year budget as well as sort of our net assets as we think about our strategic planning in the post-RAC era. So from just a budget perspective, want to remind you that in our FY 24-25 budget, we had a strategic grant allocation of 2.5 million. In September, we did already award 3 grants that totaled about 2.4 million. So there's about 100,000 left in that. For the typical nonprofit that can only spend what it actually brings in that year, that could be problematic to be considering this grant, but we're a little different in that we do have still, remaining restitution funds and investment income from those funds, well in excess of what would be needed for this. So from a budgetary standpoint, yes, we would go over budget this year, but we do have the funds to actually do the grant if the board so wanted to do it. And our budget does get approved by the city council, but this is a request from the city, so I'm not as concerned about the fact that we would be going over budget by 3.4 million, which is substantial, but it is in response to a city request. So from a budgetary standpoint, it would put us over budget, but we have the funds. So it's not a concern that way. But it would have an effect on our strategic planning deliberations. And as you know, we're looking at several different options, which will vary a little bit based on what our net assets are at the end of the fiscal year. Our thought is that we would launch into the new planning phase. We try to finish the planning this fiscal year and launch into whatever that strategy is in fiscal year 25-26. So to give you a little sense of where we stand, at the end of September, our net assets, so that's our assets, all of our assets minus any liabilities we already have committed, was 30.7 million. Our remaining budgeted expenses for this fiscal year, assuming we spend everything that we budgeted, would be about 3.3 million. So without this grant, you would be at about 27.4 million. That is assuming that the market stays relatively stable. There's no big ups or downs between now and next June. But that would be about 27.4 million. So if we were to consider and approve the Crestmore Fields grant request of 3.4 million, that would take us down to 24 million. So that's where we would be. You're looking at sort of the difference between 27.4 and 24 million. Our previous strategic planning deliberations earlier this calendar year, we were thinking we might be around the $25 million range, and that was still sort of a guess. Given that actually the market has done really well in the past 6 months, we're at the 27.4 million. So we actually are doing better than we expected earlier this year, which gives us a little bit more flexibility to consider this kind of request at this point. Just to remind you, we were looking at 3 different strategic planning scenarios. The first option was is to spend all of the remaining money and do another big legacy project like the RAC, and really try to make a big impact on something substantial that the city or another community partner would not be able to do without this big influx of funding. The second option would be to spend down the remaining funds over the next 10 to 25 years over some extended period of time. So that there would be an annual budget sort of in the $1 to $2.5 million range, depending on what the time horizon was and what our net assets were. And that over time, though, you would spend down the corpus of the remaining funds. And then the third option is the endowment model, which is to basically live on in perpetuity off of the investment income, so that you couldn't spend more in a given year than sort of what investment income is, and keeping the corpus whole with inflation. In our strategic planning deliberations earlier this year, the board, what had set aside option 3 because that would be a fairly low annual budget that didn't seem like it was enough to really make a substantial impact year in and year out, and to focus mainly on options 1 and 2 as we move forward. So just to give you a little bit of perspective on each scenario and how this grant might affect it. Scenario 1, which again is the major spend down in the short term. With the, so the 2 homes show you with and without the Crestmore Fields grant. We have either 27.4 million or 24 million left, but we can't just commit that full amount. We would have operating expenses. You would want some kind of cushion allowed. So my best sort of estimate right now would be like 5 million you would want to set aside to make sure we have enough to cover our operating expenses and any other costs that may come up during that time. As we saw with the RAC, these projects take a long time. So even if we were to make a major commitment, it still may be 5, 6, 7, 8 years before that project is completed. And you would want to have enough funds to sustain the operations of the foundation during that time. Of course, you could decrease your operating costs because there would be less activity, but there will still be some operating expenses. If at the end of that time when the project's about to be done, there was a remaining balance, you could then, grant that to either that project or another project at that time. So with the Crestmore Field grant, and if you had a set aside of about 5 million, that would mean there would be 19 million to do for another legacy project, which is still a fairly substantial amount of money where you could make a substantial impact in some other major capital project. If we didn't do the Crestmore Fields grant, we would have more in the $22.4 million range. So that would give you a sense of what scenario 1 would look like with and without the grant. For scenario 2, which is the spend down over time, you can see these are the numbers that were run by Sandhill Global Advisors, our investment advisor, of what sort of the annual payout would be based on what the corpus would be of our net assets and the time horizon. So we had been looking earlier at sort of a 20-year time horizon, which at a $25 million net asset basis would be a $1.6 million payout. 24 million is a little less than that, so maybe 1.5 million. When we ran these numbers early in the year, we really didn't expect to be maybe at the $27 million level, but you can kind of just estimate that you'd be probably closer to maybe 1.8 million if you stay on that time horizon. So that these numbers still hold true, even though we ran them several months ago, to at least give you a sense of what the payout might be under that scenario. And then under scenario 3, which is the endowment live on in perpetuity, you would see that at the $25 million level, you'd have an annual sustainable payout of about $900,000. So if we were at the $24 million level, it'd be a little less than that. So sub-$1 million payout a year, probably in either case still reinforces the board's sort of tendency to not want to go with this scenario, given that it just would be a fairly low annual budget we'd be working with. And you would still have operating costs, and you wouldn't be able to give out any real substantial grants in a given year. So just wanted to refresh everyone's memory on what we had discussed and how this grant might affect that. I think bottom line, my takeaway is that the $3.4 million, quite frankly, would be the second largest grant we've given out after the RAC. And so it is a very substantial grant for the foundation, but we do have the funds to be able to do it and then be able to do any of the scenarios that we've been looking at, I think in a way that the board would be comfortable with. So I think what this tells me at least that the foundation does have the bandwidth to be able to do this grant. But it will affect our net assets.
Any questions from the board for Leslie?
I
Back.
do, yes, I see. Leslie, can we refresh my memory? Do we need to, let's say after the committee make a decision and the board approves it or whatnot, we need to go back to the council for approval of an amendment
On the strategic plan.
on our budget for 24-25?
So under our bylaws, technically, there is no exact provision for that, because we could take it back to the council if we wanted to as part of our awarding the grant and then having them approve it. By them formally accepting the grant, I think that is their acceptance that we would be going over budget.
Any other questions for Leslie? Okay, now it's the public's opportunity to comment on this entire item. Any questions or comments from the public on the Crestmore Fields item?
Great. We do have a number of speaker cards, so I'm going to go through these first and call out the folks. Then once we get to the people in person, we'll go to the people on Zoom because we do have some hands raised there as well. So let's start with David Nigel, followed by Joe Meyer. You will have 3 minutes. Hold on just a second to let me get that going.
Good evening. Most of you know me, David Nigel, 520 Skyline Boulevard, Crestmore Park. I was appointed to this Park and Rec Commission in May 1970. Next May will be my 55th year. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that so you know my commitment to kids. I was also a teacher for 50 years. And so I've taught classroom and I've coached every sport you can imagine, indoor girls hockey, everything. And so I know how important it is for these kids. Before I start though, I want to thank you as a commissioner for the RAC, the Recreation and Aquatic Center. It is the most beautiful, every person I speak to that visits it. And I want to thank you and the city for funding that. It's immaculate. Number 2, my son started playing AYSO at Monteverdi Field. He was 6 years old, and the skills that he learned and the ethics and teamwork were so important. And that's why I'm supporting this plan, and I hope you will support it. I look in the audience and I see so many volunteers that I met at the San Mateo Union High School Board of Trustees meeting years ago when we knew they were thinking about selling the Crestmore High School property. And we were telling them how important, because when I started on the commission, baseball and girls softball were the biggest thing in San Bruno. Now it's soccer, girls and boys soccer, football. And so that's how important it is. And just part of our responsibility on the commission is to help the staff, and we have a great staff, our directors here today. And when I started, we had 20 park workers. Today we have 6, and they have 3 times the amount of responsibility. And so we help by going on park tours. Last week, Mike Palmer, our chairman, and I did Monteverdi, and I can see some of the volunteers are already putting soil and seeds there, but it's a lot of work. And there's no money. Darcy talked about that already. So before I finish, I also want to go off subject and thank you. For the last 9 years, I've been a scholarship reader with Maria. We're the 2 veterans, old people, mature people. And I want to thank you for that opportunity. It is such an uplifting experience, and it takes a lot of hours. And I want to compliment Leslie and Jessica and Stephanie, who I've worked with, are fantastic people. Thank you very much.
Next is Joe Meyer and then Mazen Maslali.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Meyer. I am San Bruno AYSO Safety and Field Director and have been on their board here for 16 years now. Just want to let you know that San Bruno AYSO has been vibrant here in San Bruno for 50 years. This is our 50th year, 2024. Wanted to let you also know that thank you for the work that you've done to support the community and the endeavors that you have in the new RAC Center, you know, as well as all the other grants that you have funded throughout the years, that you had the ability to do that. I'd like to support Darcy for coming up here and presenting this. This is a well-needed project that definitely needs to be funded out there. Like she said, time is of the essence, and we have no other funding sources available to us. And if this doesn't happen, that's going to end up being just a fenced-in dirt lot up there. And that would just be a complete shame to miss this opportunity to do something like this for the community. As you can see, these kids, you know, where else are they going to play? Right now, we're currently displacing them throughout the community with the help of the San Bruno Park School District using their fields. And again, thank you for giving us funding to help improve those fields throughout the years. It's just definitely needed on there. One of the things that when this development went through and we worked with the architects, counselor associations, in order to get the fields, the reduction in the field size, one of the things that was important was the lighting on it, because we're reducing it from 300,000 square feet of grass that we have up there now to almost 2/3 of it's going to be missing. In order to get those same number of kids out there on the field, we have to have the lighting that's out there. So it's a vital part of the project. It'd be like you guys building the aquatic center and saying, well, we don't quite have the money to heat the pools, but we'll put the piping in, but we're not going to do it, you know? It's vital that those fields be lit, you know? You talked about portable lighting versus the permanent standard lighting. Portable lighting it's not as efficient. There's all the bleed back from it. That's the big difference. The newer permanent stadium lighting that comes out that they used at Cappuccino recently, when you get off to the street, it has very little effect, if any, on those houses down there. It lights the field and not all the surrounding areas that are out there. So there is a big difference between portable lighting and permanent lighting that would be out there. But again, I'd like to remind, you know, this is just an opportunity that we have to have the developer come in and do some of the work, or do all of the work, you know, now, because, you know, in 5 years, it's going to cost more money, you know. So please, I hope you support the project and provide the funding for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Watson and then Ilona Montoya.
Good evening, San Bruno Community Foundation and Board of Directors. My name is Nazim Salam. I am the president of the Lowen Soccer Club. I've been involved with the soccer community for roughly 20 years. My kids started out playing AYSO and finished up playing Lowen. I've had the privilege of being a coach, volunteer coach, team manager, and board member for both AYSO and San Bruno and Lowen. And as you heard, the Crestmore is coming to a close next month, and we do want a second act if possible. Yeah, even though it's a smaller field, I think it's very important for the kids. We have roughly between the two clubs around 1,000 kids that play soccer in the fall, another 350 that play in the spring. Lowen is a competitive club, so we travel, and we have a very good reputation being a very strong club among competitive teams. There was a large tournament recently in Stanford. We sent 5 teams in different age groups, and all 5 teams made it to the championship games. 2 won, 3 of them came up a little bit short, but we always compete no matter what tournament we enter. And Crestmore's always been home for us, so it would be great if you could find a way to fund what's needed so that we could get a second act for Crestmore. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Ilona Montoya. I've been involved with youth soccer since 1984. both of my kids went through soccer. I've been involved with AYSO, Lowen, the district level and the state levels and on all the boards. The kids need the soccer fields and they need soccer fields with lights. And I just want to let you know that kids not only learn how to play soccer, but it's a life experience. They learn respect and responsibility that they'll carry throughout their lives. Please consider doing this grant. And please, let's find a way to get the lights on the fields. Thank you.
Thank you. Else here from the public that would like to?
Anybody else in person? We have some online.
Fine, Leslie? Yeah.
Amanda and Dominic, I'm gonna bring you through.
Thank you. Good evening, San Bruno Foundation Board. My name is Amanda Parker Govea. I'm a parent of a Lowens, I apologize, I might end up crying, of a Lowens player. I'm here to express my strong support for funding the Crestmore Fields project. I have been involved in the soccer community for over 15 years, coaching and managing teams, and I have seen firsthand how transformative these programs can be. Hundreds of children I've worked with have benefited from playing sports, and I still run into many of these young people today. Kids I coached, managed, or even knew as opponents of my own children. The positive impact of sports on their lives is clear, and I can't overstate how much these experiences shape their growth and success. Programs like Lowen's, in which my son participates, offer an accessible way for children in our community to stay active, build friendships, and learn important life skills like discipline, teamwork, and resilience. These aren't just sports lessons, they're lessons that build character and community. The positive effects of programs like Lowen Soccer extend far beyond the field, creating a supportive, healthy environment that strengthens the community as a whole. The Crestmore Fields project would provide a dedicated space, urgently needed, especially for low-cost clubs like Lowen Soccer that make a real difference in the lives of so many families. This facility would offer youth safe, well-maintained place for them to grow and thrive. With this parcel, there's a unique opportunity for the city to build a community resource. The approved subdivision includes 6.91 acres for public recreational use, and the Crestmore Fields master plan envisions a community space with soccer fields, picnic areas, restrooms, concession buildings, and on-site parking, a space that is vital resource for families across San Bruno. However, this project comes with significant costs. As stated here tonight, up to $12 million, as estimated in 2023, with annual construction inflation compounding this figure. Given the lack of sufficient funding to complete the project, I'm asking the foundation to consider this allocation towards bringing Crestmore Fields to life. This investment would be an investment in the community's future and in the lasting well-being of all youth. Thank you for your consideration and thank you for all you do to support the families and children in San Bruno. I hope that you can take a public comment from my son, Dominic Govea.
Hi, my name is Dominic Govea and I'm 12 years old. I've been playing soccer for as long as I can remember, and I also play baseball and other sports. Sports are a huge part of my life, not just because of the game we play, but because of all the important lessons they teach me every day. Being part of sport family, where my older brothers also played, has shown me what it really means to be committed, disciplined, and always pushing myself to improve. Soccer and baseball have taught me how to work hard, stay focused, and never give up. Even when things get tough, more than just learning how to play, I've learned how to be a good teammate and leader, how to communicate with others, and how to stay positive, whether we win or lose. These lessons help me not only in sports, but also in school in my relationships with friends and as I grow up to be a young adult. A place like Crestmore Fields would give kids like a chance to keep learning and growing, not just as athletes, but as individuals. It would provide a safe space for us to practice these lessons, develop new skills, and build friendships that last. It would be more than just a sport field. It would be a place where kids can come together, make memories, and grow into better people. Thank you for listening and thank you for considering how important this field would be for kids like me and for our future.
Thank you. Anyone else, Leslie?
Yes, we have Rich Fern. Rich, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm actually not on vacation, but I had personal business in Hawaii, so unfortunately I can't be there today. I know it was pouring rain yesterday, okay? They had flood warnings where I was at, so it's not all like you think of Hawaii is. Anyway, I really want to thank the Community Foundation. I spoke to you, I think, last month, and what I really like to say is the Aquatic Center is great, but I want to remind everybody, we wouldn't have any of this money unless because of the tragedy that we had of the gas explosion, right? And after that explosion happened, okay, there was all of it, what we're going to do with the money. It was trying to decide. I went to all these meetings, right? We had all these, the community at Transferan and everything else. And one of the big things that they talked about was sports, having places for these kids to go out and a place where they can remember, okay, things that happened. And then we're talking about that you're at the San Bruno Community Services. That's what I'm seeing on the screen right now. This is the community fund. Well, soccer has been a big part of our community for 50 years now. And so I think it's a no-brainer, but that's not for me to say. But I think that I want to support this, and hopefully you guys will support this also. We can come up with the funds at least to build the fields with the turf fields at the bare minimum. But as you heard, and Darcy can actually go back to the architect that the city paid, and they did an analysis of how many hours they'll need to replace the space that we had there. And you can see that without lights, there's just still not going to be enough space. And I want to thank the community also foundation because you actually just recently gave the school district money for the fields that we can use temporarily that will be also augment some of that space we're going to need. So we're going to use those elementary fields, which I've been helping before I left, and we have to finish them up for next season to get them ready. And we've been working with the city hand in hand because Monteverde is really our only field that we actually have that we can use right now. So those are going to be our temporary fields, but they'll be going to also maybe make the difference. So I think when they talk to Brian, if they're going to hire him to redo everything, he can do that analysis again and figure out how much space we need. But we're definitely going to need some type of lighting there. And if they can at least have the conduit in, like Mr. Rain said, so that, and probably put the embeds in. So later on, when we do find the money, maybe we can put the permanent lights that we actually need there because it would cost a lot more money later on. And at least if we have the conduit and the embeds ready for whatever lights we can buy later and use the temporary lights now. And it looks like I was concerned about the funding that you had, but it looks like, you know, we got to spend the money on something. And you just had this legacy of the Aquatic Center. Well, I think this is a no better legacy because it said this would be the second most grant that you would actually give to somebody. Well, this would be part of the lasting legacy and remembering those people and the tragedy that we had in San Bruno. Thank you for your time tonight. And I have full support, and hopefully you are too, and we'll fund this project. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else, Leslie?
I don't see anyone else online.
Okay.
Anyone else?
All right. Any comments or discussion from the board? Belinda?
So, for me, the Crestmore Field and the gas line tragedy has a weird emotional connection. Because my daughter, like Darcy's children, my daughter was in AYSO in the early part of their, they didn't choose soccer as their long-term sport. But the night of the tragedy, we were standing on the Crestmore fields and we saw the fireball from the fields. So in many ways, I feel an emotional connection to kind of bringing those fields back with the monies from the restitution. So I just wanted to share that story.
Great. Any other board member comments? Okay, we've heard from the board, heard from the public. Unless there are any further comments from the board, may I call for a motion to adopt a resolution creating and appointing members to the ad hoc committee on the ad hoc committee on the Crestmore Fields project?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Raul, please take the roll.
Board Member Belinda Wong.
Aye.
Board Member Supriya Perry is excused with notice. Treasurer Pat Lynn.
Aye.
Secretary Raul Gomez is an absolute aye. Vice President Jim Roy.
Aye.
President Melissa Natani Jones.
Thank you. That concludes this item. Thank you, Darcy and Leston.
And just for the public's information, so the board has created a committee. That committee will study the city's proposal and come back with a recommendation for funding to the full board. Our hope is to be able to do that by the December 4th board meeting. So it will likely be on the December 4th agenda as well, just so you're aware of the timing of this. And you're welcome to come back at that time also.
Item number C, and if you want us to take just a 1-minute break, if you want to listen to our other items, that's fine. If not,
You don't need to stay.
let you get your kids back to homework, bed.
Yeah.
All right. We call the meeting back to order. The next item is C, receive a report from the ad hoc committee on the San Bruno and Narita Sister City program. President Melissa Natani Jones is chair of the ad hoc committee on the San Bruno and Narita Sister City program and will give a brief report. Melissa?
Thank you so much, Vice President Ruane. Since 1990, San Bruno has had a sister city relationship with Narita, Japan. A key feature of the relationship has been an annual exchange program through which delegations of middle school students and city representatives visit the other town. The program took a pause during the pandemic, and in September 2023, after the City of San Bruno and the San Bruno Park School District began making plans to rejuvenate the San Bruno sister city relationship with Narita, the foundation created an ad hoc committee on San Bruno Narita Sister City program, charged with researching and considering ways in which the foundation could support San Bruno's sister city relationship with Narita, and as appropriate, return to the board with a possible strategic grant-making proposal to support such efforts. Last week, the city, San Bruno Park School District, and the San Bruno Education Foundation, at the school's district's fundraising partner, submitted a grant proposal related to the San Bruno Narita Sister City relationship. The funding request is for a total of $124,000 over 3 years, with a portion of the city to help underwrite expenses related to hosting the Japanese delegation when it visits in March, and related to sending a city delegation leader to Narita in July. A portion to the school district through the Education Foundation to subsidize the travel expenses of the Parkside students selected to visit Narita in order to increase access to the opportunity to all interested Parkside 8th grade students, regardless of the family's ability to afford the trip, and a smaller portion to be used for sustainability purposes. That is to enable the city school district. The Education Foundation developed an apparatus to fundraise for the program. So these entities are able to sustain an appropriate level of funding once SBCF funding sunsets. Goals of the proposal include ensuring that San Bruno shows Narita the same high level of hospitality that Narita shows to us, broadening community impact and engagement in the relationship, and assisting the city, school district, and Ed Foundation in developing a fundraising and sponsorship model to support the relationship in the coming years. Prior to the pandemic, San Bruno had a sister city committee that helped with fundraising, but that nonprofit group closed shop during the pandemic. The committee has asked questions and provided feedback to the city, school district, Ed Foundation on the proposal, and will be meeting again this month to further evaluate the proposal and develop a recommendation for the full board. Our goal is to bring a grant recommendation to the board in December so that the city and school district can move forward, and their plans to continue the exchange program in 2025, a visit by Narita delegation in San Bruno in March, and a visit by the San Bruno delegation in Narita in July. That's the end of my report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Good. Thank you, Melissa. Any questions from the board? No? Any questions from the public?
No.
Okay, we're good. Any questions or comments from the board? We're good. Was there any further comments from the board? That concludes this item. Thank you, Melissa. Brings us to item D, receive report on other programs, the Crestmore Scholarship, Community Grant Funds, and Strategic Grants. Leslie?
And I'm going to talk briefly about all of our other programs that are in place. First, the Community Grants Fund. We are deep into the evaluation phase. Jessica just came up for air today after being deep into the 55 applications we received this year. I believe that's the highest number we have ever received in a single cycle, which has provided a very robust and competitive applicant pool. A lot of repeat applicants as well as a number of new applicants. So a good mix of both. We're in the middle of the review process. We have a review panel of 13 volunteers who have reviewed and rated the applications. The panel will be meeting to discuss those applications and make a recommendation on grant awards to the board. The goal is for the board to receive those recommendations and consider awarding those grants at the December board meeting. As you know, we have a $100,000 donation from YouTube and Google again this year, so we will be giving out a total of $300,000 in grants again this year. In past years, we've typically given 23 to, I think, the very high end 29 grants a year, so it's probably in the mid-20s is what likely will again happen this year. In terms of the Crestmore Scholarship, the 2025 cycle, which is, believe it or not, I believe our 10th time doing the scholarship. We are just starting the process now of getting that going. The idea is to launch with the application in December and market to the high schools and community colleges. We are in the process of reviewing all the materials and getting them ready for our marketing pieces as well as the online application. Jessica will be setting up virtual and in-person workshops for applicants, both at Cappuccino and Skyline, and online for anybody to participate in. And we've set the application deadline for Tuesday, March 4th, 2025, which is right around the same time we typically have the deadline. So that's moving forward. Quick update on our active strategic grants. With regard to the RAC, we still have 3 RAC grants that are in process. In October, we received the latest quarterly reports and made a grant payment of $2,700. We paid out a total of just under $51 million. And so we now have a balance of just a little over $500,000 left to pay, which it looks like we will pay either hopefully in the next payment or the quarter after. We're hoping to receive what we hope is a final update from the city on the RAC construction project at the December meeting. With regard to Centennial Plaza, as you know, the Centennial Plaza the construction has been completed and was opened. We had a ribbon cutting ceremony on October 25th. Vice President Ruane represented us in the speaking ceremony. We received the latest grant report from the city on that grant and paid out the remaining $157,000 on that grant. So we have fully dispersed the $500,000 on that grant. And again, we hope to have a report to the board at our December meeting on that project. Florida Avenue Park, as Assistant City Manager Smith mentioned, there will be a groundbreaking on that park on November 15th. There is an invitation you have all received about that ceremony. This was actually one of the first grants the foundation made back in 2017. We contributed $200,000 to that, park project. At that time, the budget was smaller. There have been a number of delays, related to that project, which has pushed out the timeline and why we were now at groundbreaking, in 2024. For those of you who aren't familiar with where the park is, it is on the east side of town, just south of, sort of southeast of basically San Mateo Avenue downtown. And it's a neighborhood in San Bruno that does not currently have a neighborhood park. So it is bringing this community amenity to an area of town that has not had that kind of community amenity. So it's a very important, I think, project for the city. And we are excited that it's finally moving forward. And then the grants that the board approved in September. So as you recall, you approved 3 grants, one for startup programming, one for school athletic field improvements, and one for the El Crystal Memorial Bench. We have executed grant agreements with the grantee in all 3 cases. We paid out the full amount of the El Crystal Memorial Bench grant. That was only $1,200 to the city in September. We paid out the first $50,000 installment of funds for the school field improvement grants. That's for John Muir Field. Most of that work was done over the summer, so we were able to move forward with that payment. Payment for the other 2 fields at Parkside and Bel Air will take place once the school board has formally approved moving forward with a contractor on those fields and has approved any additional funds that are needed to complete those field improvements. On the RAC startup programming grant, we have not made any grant payments yet. Our agreement with the city was to do a payment on an annual basis. That's a 3-year grant. So it will be at the end of each fiscal year. So our first payment on that will be next summer, based on a report they give us. So that's where we are with those grants.
Good. Any questions from the board?
Actually, I have a question with respect to the BRAC. So are the landscape part of Crystal Springs, part of the funds that we are contributing or giving towards, again, the BRAC? Because I see that there is work, and I'm just wondering if that is going to actually get fixed, if you will, because it's unsightly.
That's a question. I mean, that would have fallen under the construction grant, and whether, there was additional funding at the end.
So it wasn't officially
cover that. It's not part of the programming grant, because that was really for programs and driving people into the RAC, not so much site improvements.
Okay.
I do know that the city has plans to landscape that area there on Crystal Springs Road.
Where the stumps are.
Where the stumps are and all that. They have a plan. Go. It's just not done yet.
Yeah, those were the trees that got taken down during the windstorm, right?
That's part of it, yeah.
Yeah,
They had to take some trees down for,
there's just some berms there that are existing. They gotta clean it all. So, any other questions from the board?
I couldn't recall, and maybe this is more of a question for, are we gonna get interim reports on the RAC programming, at least the committee?
Yes, the agreement was they would come to the full board twice in the first year and at least once in years 2 and 3. So again, the December meeting, assuming Travis comes and does all those other reports, we would ask him to do the first one for this year on that as well.
Thank you for the refresher.
Anything else? Any questions or comments from the public?
Nobody online with the hand raised.
Okay. Any other discussion for board members? We're good. Unless there are any further comments from the board, that concludes the report on other programs. Thank you, Leslie. Item number E, discuss upcoming officer elections for 2025 term. Under our officer elections process, we agendize the subject of officer elections prior to taking nominations and holding the election to allow for board discussion on this topic. I'll open the floor up to comments from any colleagues who would like to speak. Any questions from the public? Nothing? Okay. Any comments or discussion from board members? I'll Unless there are any further comments from the board, that concludes the discussion on officer elections. This is a report only, no action to be taken. Item F, actually elect officers for 2025, president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. Foundation's bylaws call for an annual election of president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer, whose terms start on January 1st. 2016, the board adopted principles and process which govern the foundation's election of officers. Under this process, officer elections are held no later than the board's regular November meeting, so that per the bylaws, the San Bruno City Council can consider and approve the officers by December 31st. Following the adopted process, I will be calling for nominations in the following order: president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. Are there any discussions before I call for nominations? Any questions from the public? Okay, I call for nominations for president.
I nominate Melissa Antoni Jones.
Second.
Okay, roll.
So board member Belinda Wong.
Aye.
Board member Supriya Perry is excused with notice. Treasurer Pac Lin.
Aye.
Secretary Raul Gomez is an aye. Vice President Jim Ruane.
Aye.
And President Melissa Antoni Jones. Did she vote for herself? Yes. Melissa Antoni Jones.
I,
There was a hesitation.
no, I was just a little choked up. I was a little choked up.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. Congratulations. I now call for nominations for vice president.
I nominate Jim Wayne for vice president.
Thank you.
I'll second.
There's a motion, second roll.
Board member Belinda Wong.
Aye.
Board member Supriya Perry is excused with notice. Treasurer Pac Lin.
Aye.
Secretary Raul Gomez is an aye. Vice President Jim Ruane.
Sure. Aye.
President Melissa Antoni Jones.
I,
Thank you. Thank you. Call for nominations for secretary.
I nominate Raul Gomez for the secretary position.
second,
The motion and second roll, please.
Board member Belinda Wong.
Aye.
Board member Supriya Perry is excused with notice. Treasurer Pac Lin.
Aye.
Secretary Raul Gomez is, thanks. Vice President Jim Ruane.
Aye.
President Melissa Antoni Jones.
I,
Now call for nominations for treasurer.
I'll nominate Pac Lin.
Second.
All right, board member Belinda Wong.
Aye.
Board member Supriya Perry is excused with notice. Treasurer Pac Lin.
Thank you. And
Secretary
yes.
Raul Gomez. Aye. And Vice President Jim Ruane.
Aye.
And President Melissa Antoni Jones.
I,
Great. We have our board officers for 2025. Congratulations to all. Thank you. Per the bylaws, the San Bruno City Council will consider approving our slate of elected officers at an upcoming meeting, most likely on December the 10th. Item number 8, board member comments. Would any board member like to make a comment? Just like to say happy Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Right. Okay.
Thanksgiving.
Anything from the public, Leslie?
No.
Okay. Unless there are any further comments from the board, that concludes this agenda item, and our final item is adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
second,
In a second, we don't need to vote on this.